It's in full swing, and children of all ages are enjoying hiking, vacation, sports, and camp activities.
It's also a busy season for pediatricians. Parents are bringing their kids to the doctor with injuries that could have been prevented. So joining us now to talk about it is Dr. Desai, a pediatrician at New York Presbyterian Medical Group in Queens. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, let's begin by talking about staying safe in the sun. Obviously, sunscreen helps, but some kids put up a major fight when their parent is trying to get them to put this on, even with bug spray. What do you suggest that they do?
Yeah, this is definitely a common issue that I can also sympathize with. So first of all, you want to try to, depending on the age of your child, and explain to them what the importance of sunscreen is, why it's important. Sometimes we really underestimate our children and how much they understand. Get them on board, get their buy-in of keeping themselves safe, and then try to involve them in applying their sunscreen as well. Instead of just kind of trying to slather them up at the last minute on your way out the door, try to make a fun game out of it. You can try to have them paint their arms, paint their legs. They can put sunscreen on you, the parents or grandparents, or even their baby dolls. And when you sort of get them involved and try to make the process fun, kids are generally much more interested in being involved. Make sure it's non-negotiable. At the end of the day, this is something that has to get done before we go out and have fun. And once kids understand that, they're usually willing to let you do what you got to do so that you can get out to the beach and have a good time.
What a good habit to establish, too, on your way to adulthood. All right, what are some of the other ways to help kids stay safe out in the sun?
So, of course, sunscreen is great, and that's going to be a great way once you're out and about in the sun. Also, UPF clothing, so UV protection clothing, as well as hats are going to be helpful to really protect, give you a physical barrier between the skin and the sun. And then definitely staying in the shade when possible. This is obviously not always possible, but when possible, take cover under a tree, under an umbrella if you can. And then, of course, we want to keep our skin safe, but another risk of being outdoors always is getting dehydrated. You're running around, it's hot, you're sweating, so make sure you always have a water bottle with cool water in it, and take some water breaks so that you don't get dehydrated.
Okay, speaking of water, let's move on to water safety. We know that drownings are the #1 cause of death for kids age 1 to 4. So how can parents stress the importance of kids staying safe in the water without, really scaring them?
Yes, definitely a large concern. So the biggest advice I can give is to have a discussion about some ground rules around pools and oceans before you are exposed. So when you're at home, before you leave, have a discussion about the rules. It's important to stay with a parent, stay with an adult anytime you're in the pool. Don't go in by yourself. Don't run. These are all things that it's better to discuss ahead of time rather than when you get there. Children are excited, they're anxious to get in, and they may only be half listening. So lay out those ground rules ahead of time. Make sure that there's always somebody watching children when they're in the pool or near the water. And if you're ever in a situation with a private pool, a fence around the pool is the #1 thing that can be helpful to protect kids.
So what are some playground injuries, and how can those be avoided? Because that's also a big one, especially when kids are so anxious to be outside this summer.
Absolutely. So, there's obviously a lot of minor injuries that come with being at a playground. Cuts, scrapes, bruises, kids will run around, fall. That's always going to happen. So those, of course, you want to keep an eye on your child and keep them as safe as possible. What we worry more about is some of the more serious injuries, such as fractures or head injuries. This usually happens when kids are running up the slide or up on high parts of the playground, and maybe they fall or they twist an ankle. These are things that are sometimes a little bit more serious and might require more medical attention. So those are kind of the biggest things that we see. And really the biggest way that you can keep your child safe is just to constantly supervise them. Make sure you have an eye on your kid at all times. Sometimes it's tempting. You see a parent or a friend at the playground, and you want to chat with them while your kids are off playing. And while that's great to socialize yourself as well and have fun, you want to make sure you keep an eye so that if you see your child getting up to a dangerous spot that they could get themselves into trouble, you can swoop in and keep them safe.
Especially around water.
Yep.
All right, well, Dr. Desai, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.